You all remember those long, exciting road trips to your great aunt's house? You know, the house stained with cat piss and dog hair? The destination was never great, clearly, but the journey there was always the exciting part because you knew you had hours of unadulterated gaming bliss on your handheld. For those brief hours, you could dive into an entire new world. A new world where you can try to forget about your creepy Uncle Herschel. I look back at my childhood town, honestly, and I still don't remember any of the streets or how to get around because I always had my head buried in my Nintendo DS. Well, those days are in the past now, and all that's left are your fondest childhood memories. Sucks, right? Here we stand in 2023 with a completely different gaming landscape from what we grew up with. Nowhere is this more obvious than with the state of portable gaming. Last year, Nintendo put their 3DS line to sleep, effectively ending 3 decades of utter dominance in the pure handheld gaming market. As these pocket-sized machines are fading into history, traditional handheld gaming is on its dying breath. How did we get here? Well, let's start with where it all really began. Before even the Game Boy, there was the Game & Watch toy line. This name probably rings a bell for you because of this guy. To be honest, this little gadget was, well, it was a piece of shit. But given how primitive computers were back then, it was cleverly crafted to provide a simple, arcade-like, one-trick gaming experience. It got the job done, and it got Nintendo's feet wet in the gaming industry. But we clearly had a long way to go before we started seeing masterpieces such as Duck Dynasty for the 3DS. In comes the Game Boy in 1989. Just like the Game & Watch, when this came out I was nothing but an idea in my newlywed parents' heads, so I can't personally speak on the sheer level of hype that came with this release. But I imagine it was something like this.
You can take it to the lake. You can take it on a date.
The Game Boy was groundbreaking, as you already know, and laid the groundwork for every handheld console to follow. You know the deal after this. Next came the Game Boy Color in 1998. By this point, I was actually a young sperm cell. Shout out my dad. After the Color though, which was honestly just a glorified Game Boy, the innovation started coming at a much quicker pace, with the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance SP, and DS coming right after the other. I logged countless hours on my little red Game Boy Advance SP, and it holds some of my fondest gaming memories, period. Hours and hours spent underneath my covers, holding in farts so that my parents would think I'm asleep. One time, and I swear to God this is a true story, I literally shit my pants instead of going to the bathroom because I didn't want to wake up my parents.
Ew, what's that smell? Yo, dude, you smell that? What's going on in here? What are you doing? Oh, all right, I guess you're just sleeping through that then. All right, well, good night, dude.
Anyways, the early 2000s, when the Game Boy Advance SP dominated, that was a golden age of handheld gaming. Nintendo was pumping out classic after classic, and these games brought completely different experiences than their counterparts on consoles. You couldn't get by with just a GameCube or a Wii if you wanted in on these types of games. Pokemon, the most obvious example, was a staple to handhelds, because it brought open gameplay and a sense of exploration, major selling points that the console titles of Pokemon couldn't hold a candle to. Even the standout Pokemon console games like Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness and Colosseum were notably linear in comparison to the handheld games. And it didn't just stop at Pokemon. Companies were pumping out too many titles to even keep up with. Every cartoon had a game, and although a lot of them boiled down to reskinned identical 2D platformers, it still felt as though the possibilities were endless. Hell, one of my favorite Game Boy games as a kid was Hamtaro Ham Games. Obviously, a lot of these games are objectively not great, but they made for good fun when we were young and our standards were pretty low. The good times continued to roll with the launch of the Nintendo DS, which I literally played until the hinges fell off. With the DS came even more innovation, a nifty second touchscreen which made my pea-sized child brain explode. As far as the DS went, it just kept up the pace that the GBA brought, and the DS line as a whole became incredibly sleek over time despite dropping Game Boy compatibility. When they came out with the DSi, I was so mad about that. But I will say, the DSi camera was pretty damn cool.
Yo, bro, you trying to grab a bite before we go out tonight? Bro, is that a DSi? Get out! Get the fuck out!
Nintendo was on top of the world. Some of their consoles didn't do too well commercially, like the infamous Wii U, but they knew they could bank on their handheld dominance. Competitors came and went. Most of them couldn't even come close to touching the heights that Nintendo had reached. The number of quality titles was simply unbeatable. Sony made the most valiant attempt with their launch of the PSP in 2005, and the line saw considerable success as it tried to follow PlayStation's model of kind of reaching a more mature audience. I think it's also worth noting that the form factor of Sony's consoles definitely laid the groundwork for what we're seeing now in the Nintendo Switch and the Steam Deck coming out soon. But nonetheless, Nintendo was the king. They ran the streets. But all good things come to an end, and the handheld market was on the verge of changing forever, thanks to one man. Apple introduced the iPhone and iPod Touch, and soon their own App Store to go with it. This App Store became host to a new breed of video games, built for portability to the most extreme degree, with simple-to-learn game mechanics and an emphasis on addicting gameplay loops. I remember begging for an iPod Touch for Christmas and immediately downloading Doodle Jump. The pioneer mobile games that hit the App Store were genuinely a lot of fun. When it came to the best apps, for $1 or $2 you had access to a fully fleshed game with tons of levels and gameplay. And this was enough to catch the world by storm. Very quickly people began turning to their smartphones to get their gaming fix on the go. I mean, Angry Birds reached such heights that it eventually became one of the most milked franchises of all time. But, as with all things, this sphere became less interesting as it got more profitable. It was when Flappy Bird in 2048 came out and became monster hits that app developers realized they didn't need tons of content to make a ton of money. If a game was free and addicting enough, you could litter it with ads and watch your profits soar. It became the norm for the industry that we see now. Junky titles with stock assets dominate the App Store and just get their downloads through aggressive, horrible, terrible ads on social media. The pervasiveness of smartphones throughout this past decade has clearly only made this new method of gaming more prevalent. Nintendo and Sony made attempts to bring substance back to portable gaming with their 3DS and Vita lines, but Apple and Android games secured the crown, and I mean, it's easy to see why. Truth be told, it's almost an unfair comparison. Nearly everybody has phones in their pockets, and these slabs are constantly demanding our attention. From our messaging apps to our Jackson Mahomes twerking apps, I mean, now you could consume hours of OnlyFans and then switch over to some shitty Squid Game knockoff on the same device. It makes sense that most people want to also play their games on the same device for simplicity's sake. Regardless, I think there's something to be said about the cheap, mindless formula that has replaced what we used to play. Curiously enough, we seem to have come full circle in the way in which we treat mobile gaming. As technology has grown better and the slabs in our pockets, we somehow slipped back into the monotonous, simple gaming loop with which we began, when there are no other options with the Game & Watch. Are smartphone games just that much better or more convenient? Or have our attention spans just plummeted in these recent times? Oh shit, everybody look, he's doing it again! Look at him go! Completely gone are the days where you will see a kid who values their handheld over their Fortnite machines and iPhones. However, the future of handheld gaming isn't as bleak as I'm making it out to be. The past few years we've seen a reignition of interest in handheld gaming, thanks in part to the release of the Nintendo Switch. And when first writing the script, I had actually labeled the Switch as the final nail in the coffin to handheld gaming, mainly due to the fact that it's a home console at its core, and with its release, Nintendo essentially gave up on their 3DS line entirely. Yes, you can raise the argument that the Switch Lite kinda shows that Nintendo still cares about making pure handhelds, but its limitation in many Switch games, most notably its lack of motion controls, prove otherwise. Look up Mario Odyssey or Smash, and you can see that Nintendo is building most Switch titles with the TV as the main focus. Aside from that little nitpick though, the Switch has still brought a breath of fresh air to the gaming industry, and it sort of stands as an antithesis to modern mobile gaming. With its ever-growing collection of acclaimed games like Breath of the Wild and Metroid Dread, it goes to show that people still want to play large AAA titles even on the road. The success of the Switch is also forcing industry titans to reconsider gaming on the go, whether through streaming like the xCloud or with many PCs designed for games like the Steam Deck. And we're even seeing startup companies hop in the ring with new imaginative spins on the classic form factor like the Playdate. Look at this thing, it has a crank. The fact of the matter is, despite the dominance of the App Store and all my complaining earlier, handheld gaming is not dead. I do see new life coming with this next generation of handhelds beginning to take root, and I'm excited for what's on the horizon. So with that being said, thanks for watching.